Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into an absolutely incredible story of royal defiance, a powerful prophet, and literal fire from heaven. Yeah, it's a tense showdown you won't want to miss from the first chapter of 2 Kings.
So you have to ask yourself, what actually happens when a king picks a fight with heaven itself? Well, this short but incredibly action-packed chapter from 2 Kings is all about that. It's just jam-packed with themes of power, faith, and the very real consequences of defiance.
All right, let's set this scene. The year is around 841 BC. Israel's infamous King Ahab is finally dead, but that hasn't solved everything. In fact, the kingdom is on seriously shaky ground, and a major crisis is brewing.
Right out of the gate, the kingdom gets hit with this one-two punch of bad news. First, in verse 1, with Ahab gone, Moab sees its chance and rebels. That's a huge sign of political weakness. And then, as if that's not enough, verse 2 tells us the new king, Ahaziah, takes a nasty fall right through a lattice in his own palace. So now the kingdom is vulnerable from the outside, and its leader is stuck in bed, critically injured.
Okay, so this is where things get really interesting. Instead of praying to the God of Israel for help, the injured king does something bold. Verse 2 says he sends messengers to ask Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron, if he's going to recover. I mean, wow. This is a massive act of defiance. Baal-zebub, which means Lord of the Flies, was a Philistine god. For an Israelite king to go to him for help, that's a direct slap in the face to his own people and their faith. But here's the thing, that message never makes it to Ekron. The king's mission is about to be intercepted by a very familiar and very formidable figure. And who stops him in their tracks? In verse 3, it's none other than the prophet Elijah. He confronts them with this blistering question. And you gotta understand, this isn't a real question, it's a takedown. He's basically saying, what, you think God just packed up and left Israel? Is that why you're running to a false god?
And right after that bombshell question, he drops the verdict. Verse 4 gives us God's direct judgment delivered through Elijah. The message couldn't be clearer. King Ahaziah is not getting out of that bed. His fate is sealed. It's over.
So the messengers, probably pretty shaken, turn right around and go back to the king. Ahaziah asks them, well, what did this guy look like? And in verse 8, they paint this picture of a wild, rugged man, a hairy man with a leather belt. You know, the complete opposite of anyone you'd find dressed in finery at the royal court. And just from that simple description, the king knows. He doesn't even need to hear the name. He knows exactly who just challenged his authority. Of course, it's Elijah, the same prophet who was the arch nemesis of his father Ahab. So, does the king listen to this divine warning? Does he repent? Nope. He does the exact opposite. He decides to escalate things. He's not going to take this challenge to his authority lying down, quite literally. So what does he do? He makes a power play. In verse 9, he sends a captain with 50 soldiers to go arrest the prophet. He's going to show this man of God who's really in charge. The captain finds Elijah sitting on top of a hill and barks the king's order. And listen to the tone here. He calls him man of God, but it is dripping with sarcasm. This is a command, not a request. He's demanding that Elijah submit to the king. Elijah's response in verse 10 is just epic. He basically calls their bluff. Oh, you want to know if I'm a man of God? Okay, let's find out. And then, boom, fire comes down from heaven and completely consumes the captain and all 50 of his men. It's a shocking, terrifying, and undeniable answer. Now, you'd think that after losing 51 men in a supernatural fireball, the king would get the message, right? Wrong. In verse 11, we learn something just unbelievable. After hearing what happened, the king doesn't back down. He just sends a second captain with another 50 men. And get this, the second captain doubles down on the arrogance. He repeats the same demand, but this time he adds the word quickly, as if being more demanding is going to work this time. This is just pure pride on display. The king is trying to assert his power over a prophet who just commanded fire from the sky. And the results, as we see in verse 12, is exactly the same. The fire of God comes down from heaven, and poof, they're gone too. This is a second, horrifying judgment. Let's do the math. That's 102 men dead, all because of the king's stubborn pride. I know what you're thinking. He didn't send a third group, did he? Oh, yes, he did. But this third captain, well, this guy is smart.
He's seen what happened to the others, and he decides to take a very, very different approach. And you can see the crucial difference right here. Unlike the arrogant commands of the first two, this third captain in verse 13 falls on his knees. He doesn't demand, he pleads. He begs for his own life and the lives of his men. He finally shows some humility and acknowledges who has the real authority here.
And that one act of humility, it changes everything. In verse 15, God gives Elijah a new command through an angel. Go down with him, don't be afraid. The respectful approach worked where brute force had failed, spectacularly. Elijah is now going to face the king directly.
So Elijah leaves the hilltop and goes with the soldiers to the capital city, Samaria. He's heading right into the lion's den to deliver his message to King Ahaziah face to face. Imagine this scene. In verse 16, Elijah is standing before the dying king, and he repeats the original prophecy, word for word. He confirms the king's fate is sealed, and he repeats the reason why, because you rejected the God of Israel and went looking for help from a foreign god. And what happens next? Exactly what Elijah said would happen. Verse 17 tells us that King Ahaziah died from his injuries. The prophet's word came true. And with the king dead, his brother Jehoram took the throne, and the political life of Israel just moved on. The chapter ends with this little historian's footnote in verse 18. It mentions that more details are in the Book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel, a book that's now lost to history. It's such a tantalizing little note, isn't it? It reminds us that this incredible story is just one small piece of a much larger history, full of stories we can only imagine.